accomplish your goals. If you're a serious athlete and the prospect of playing in college is something that you'd really like to do and you're working towards, the people on this list here are also in the room tonight, and you'll hear from each of them. They're here to help you, and they can kind of help guide you in this process. So you see some of the schools up here. This is a great list of schools. You may not know every logo that's up there, but in the mix you have some D1 schools that are highly competitive athletically and academically. You have some D3 schools like Wesleyan and Middlebury also. They're the Cardinal and I think it's the Panther, right? The Middlebury Panther. They're D3 schools that are also great academically. And I think part of the question that you have to ask yourself as an athlete, and potentially ask your coach and feedback from college level coaches as well, is kind of where you fall in the mix of these schools. One of the statistics that I'd like to share with you really quick is that out of all high school varsity athletes, so everyone who's playing high school athletics, 7% of those students go on to play in college, and 2% of them go to D1 at the college level. So what you have to kind of understand about playing in college is that if you are to be on this level, you have to excel both academically and athletically, especially if you're at Stony Brook. And one of the things that I want to bring up is that number 7% is actually a little bit skewed because there's certain sports that have very high college acceptance levels because they're kind of niche sports. For example, if you're doing a sport like crew or fencing, those sports tend to have high levels of students who play in high school go on to play in college. However, if you're playing a sport like soccer, that's going to look very different, or football, that would look very different. There's a much lower percentage. So when I give you a number like 7%, you have to take that and digest the fact that you have to be an elite level athlete if you're going to be considered at the college level. And the great thing about Stony Brook is many of you have this opportunity. Many of you are at this level athletically, and this is something that you can accomplish. But there's certain steps, procedures, and just kind of information that you need to take in so that you give yourself the best opportunity to accomplish your goals. All right, so I'm gonna be real quick with this, and then I'm gonna hand the mic over to some folks who can speak more into the academic portion of athletics. But one of the things that you need to do right away if you're interested in college athletics is talk to your coach. It's really important to get their perspective on where you stand. Most coaches, and I know the coaches at Stony Brook, they have all played at the college level or have coached kids who have gone through high school athletics and now are on to college. So they can definitely give you a good idea of where you should be. Another thing that you're going to hear more about from others in this conversation is about balancing your class load. When athletics could potentially play a role in your acceptance to a school, and what I mean by that is, for example, we'll take a NESCAC school or a D3 school. A school that I just mentioned is Middlebury. If you'd like to go play sports at Middlebury, they take on some of their teams up to maybe 7 slots. They call them slots. The first slot is for an athlete who's the most impactful athlete that they have recruited. That slot may also be potentially the student who needs the most help academically to get into the school. Their we'd call that their first slot. Their 7th slot would be the student who is closest to being a fit academically to the school and potentially the lowest level recruited athlete. And it's a building scale. So the first athlete on the list of 7 would be their best athlete. The last on the 7th athlete would be their lowest impact athlete. And so what you have to be able to do as a student at Stony Brook is understand what kind of where you may fall on a list like that for whatever level you're looking at, in whatever type of school you're looking at, and then decide, all right, how does my class load affect this, and what type of classes do I need to take? If I am an absolute outstanding impact player, I may choose the classes at Stony Brook a little bit differently than if academics is more of my ticket to the next level. A lot of you need to begin collecting film. So if you're a freshman or a sophomore or even a junior and you want coaches to begin to see you, you are going to need to reach out to those coaches. Stony Brook has just invested quite a bit of finances into Huddle. And so we will have each of our games filmed in Huddle. And as athletes here, you will be able to ask Huddle, which is the kind of filming management system, to make you a highlight video. And so that is something that you will be doing throughout the year, acquiring film and kind of reaching out to colleges and making sure for colleges that you are interested in and seeing if you can get the coach's attention that way. Your coaches will also be willing to make calls for you and that type of thing. We do that pretty regularly in the athletic office. Another thing is gathering metrics for your sports. I know in baseball, we go through all the different metrics that are pertinent to the game of baseball, like throwing velocity, running speed, exit velocity, hitting, that type of thing. Other sports, track and field, there's times, there's video that you can gather there, but there are metrics in different sports, and those may be necessary as well. One of the things that I would encourage you all to do is reach out to schools as soon as you possibly can. I know there is a lot of fear sometimes and kind of like, well, do I want to be bothersome to a college, that type of thing. Now, they have rules that they have to abide by as to when they can contact you and things like that. But the point is, showing them interest is always a good thing. And when it does become time to talk to coaches, feel free to reach out to those colleges and ask them directly whether you would be a good fit for their school. I talk to parents all the time who come to me and say, hey, I've reached out to this coach and they seem kind of interested, but they're not really getting back to me and things like that. What I will tell you is those conversations mean something. When a coach is interested in an athlete, that is generally, not all the time, but generally projected to the family. You will know when a coach wants you. You will know when a school is interested in you. And if they're kind of ghosting you or dodging you, there is potential that they're waiting to see if another athlete is going to accept, and if they don't, then maybe they contact you. But oftentimes it means you're not their first choice or you're not high on their list. I would encourage any athlete interested in playing at the next level to be part of the Better, Faster, Stronger class. I would ask you, what is the training that you are doing outside of just kind of the normal athletic piece that is required at Stony Brook? Colleges want to know how you train and how serious you are about your sport. And to be honest, if you're going to play at the next level, that's just a requirement. If you have questions about scholarship money and things like that, again, what I would tell you is you will know the intention of the universities and of the coaches in the universities by kind of what they offer you. So when you are speaking to a coach, or if we're calling a coach and they're not willing to offer you money and you're a D1 caliber athlete, well, that says something. If they're willing to offer you a full ride, well, then you know where you stand, right? You know that they're really interested in you. And so at the D1 level, something that is important to understand is that the money speaks. And I think, as an athlete, you have a decision to make. And one of the things you want to do is put yourself in a position where you know that you're wanted by the school. The last thing that I will say, and this is something that I find all the time at Stony Brook, is we all know the differences between D1, D2, D3 for the most part. D1, obviously, they're allowed to give you scholarships. D2, there's some level of financial scholarships also being given there. And kind of the thing that I want to clear up just for a second is, well, what does that D3 look like? And in an environment like Stony Brook, one of the things that I want to encourage as many athletes to just really check into is that D3 level. Now, if you're a D1 athlete and you get a free ride and you're getting scholarship at the D1 level, great, go for it. But when you're a potential D2 or a low-end D1 or maybe a D3, well, there are some D3 schools that, although they do not give scholarship, they're very high academic schools, and they offer a lot of money financially in aid. And so I can tell you hundreds of stories about students who have decided to go to inquire in the D3 and found that they got more money than they would have if they had gotten a partial scholarship at D1. So some of the schools that I think are really applicable to Stony Brook are schools that are in the NESCAC. There's a few out in California as well that are D3 schools, but the NESCAC is a league to the north of us in New England, small colleges, and they tend to give out great financial aid, and they also tend to be very, very strong athletic schools as far as the D3 level. So if you're choosing between a school like, I'll put it in this category because I went through this process on some level, Sacred Heart, which is in Fairfield, Connecticut, and Bowdoin, right, which is a NESCAC small college D3 school. Sacred Heart is a D1 school. Sometimes you'll find that even though Sacred Heart is willing to offer you a scholarship, you can get a higher ranked educational experience, at least in Bowdoin, and also maybe get more money from Bowdoin. So that is just something that I want Stony Brook athletes to consider, because oftentimes they find that they could potentially do better at the D3 level, both financially and with an academic choice. So that's my little bit. I'm going to pass it off to Mr. Bacher, who is the athletic academic advisor at Stony Brook.
All right, so the first thing that's right. So one of the first things you need to know is when you can contact coaches, right? A lot of you will wait until coaches can contact you, which generally occurs either June 15th or September 1st of sophomore summer. It depends on the sport, right? If you are gifted and you are good, right, you should be reaching out as soon as possible to these coaches, because the rules are different when you initiate contact. That's really important. A lot of our players in the past on our baseball team, for example, have gotten verbal offers and talked to coaches and figured this out ahead of time. Being proactive in this game helps, right? When you consider early in the recruiting process, a college has all of their slots open. Those slots fill up, right? And then you get competitive. So you want to jump in on the process as early as possible, right? Especially at the Division I level, every single coach has their, or every single sport has their given dates, right? For example, Division I baseball is September 1st. Know your dates, know when coaches can start reaching out to you, right? Again, know that you can contact coaches before. And if you need help with this, myself and Mr. Moniz in the athletic office are willing to sit with you, talk about your options, look over your grades, talk to your coaches, and help you come up with a list of schools that might be interested in you, and reaching out to them ourselves, kind of getting a pre-read from them if you're a fit or not. So please use us as a resource. Schedule meetings with us. You can email me or Mr. Moniz, and we are available to meet often during lunch periods, or if we have a common free period. We want to sit, we want to get a plan, we want to reach out to coaches as early as possible. College sports is a competitive process, right? It gives you an edge over just academics. It does. The acceptance rate for for athletes is much higher, but you're still competing against a lot of athletes. And so that means take advantage of the resources you have at Stony Brook. If you have schools that you think are interested in you, right, come meet with us, right? We can reach out and maybe help force their hand or get a read. We've been able to do this successfully for some of our athletes in the past. Right? Also, I want to recommend that you use your coaches here. One direction Stony Brook has gone in the recent years is hiring more competitive, more connected coaches who can not only assess your talent level and develop you athletically, but also know the college recruiting scene and can potentially place a phone call for you, get you into the right showcase, get the right coach to see you. This is something that's really important and is part of our athletic program here. We're not just about winning and losing. We are about getting you prepared for the best future possible. Right? Moving on, I am also an academic person, and for any of you who know me, I'm probably one of the more academically minded coaches. And with that, I want to talk about standardized testing, the thing that you all probably don't want to hear about, right? At the end of the day, these colleges are incredibly competitive now, right? Mr. Mona said you need to keep your course rigor up, right? Now, some of you may look at things like the PSAT, the SAT, and the ACT as not important. That can be further from the truth. Mr. Mona has talked about those slots, right? If you remember those slots, right? And he talked about slot 1 being maybe the worst academic fit, right? It is far easier to be recruited if you fit into slot 7, right? So for example, let's say we'll go with Harvard University, right? To get into Harvard University with middling SAT scores, you need to be the best at your sport, right? There are 10,000 other kids out there trying to compete against you for that, right? But if you have really good SAT scores, really good ACT scores, really good AP grades, all of a sudden you fit into slot 7. You don't cost that coach as much. You become a far more valuable resource. You can drop the talent level you have to play at to be attractive to them. Now, I am not saying don't be all you can be in your sport, but understand that good SAT scores, good ACT scores, good PSAT scores, right? If you put the time into preparing for these tests, they can only help you, right? Right? For example, I'll use myself as an example. I was an okay baseball player, right? But I had good grades and good SATs. That allowed the coach, who said straightforward to me, it's easy for me to recruit you because you're not a stretch with your SAT scores. I can fit you into a lower level slot without having to waste one of my top level slots on you. That made me attractive to more coaches, right? I am not saying any of you are mid-level talents. I hope you are all top-level talents, but understand that this can help get interest where there might not be any, right? At the end of the day, I know you all have your dream schools, right? And this is just a simple way for you to ensure that you are looked at by the schools you are interested in. Right? You may not believe, you may think it is simply your ability on the sports field. That is not true, and we have seen people with poor grades and poor SAT scores. We have seen doors close as well. So understand that these can be your best friend in the recruiting process, right? They can also be your worst enemy if you ignore them, right? So, right? As Mr. Mona says, you have to train out of season, right, physically because you are competing at that level. Understand that you have to compete in the classroom because you're competing at this level, right? And it is something I see most is the biggest mistake most high schoolers I see make is ignoring this. So please understand the importance of your grades, your AP scores, the rigor of your courses, and standardized testing. Yes, I know some schools are test optional now, but if you can get a strong score, you put yourself a bunch of other people that are competing for that same slot. So moving more into the academic realm, I'm going to hand it over to our academic dean, Mr. Smith, who also comes from a similar background, and he knows all about this. He played football at Dartmouth, so he understands exactly what this academic process looks like.
Thank you. Hi, good evening. My name is Jeff Smith. I'm the academic dean here at the Stony Brook School. It's my 14th year at the school now. Before I came here, I played 4 years of football at a Division I school, Dartmouth College, 2021 Ivy League champs. We were actually really bad last year, but we're off to a pretty good start this year. And so I just want to affirm all of your athletic ambitions and just say that they mesh exactly with Stony Brook's academic and institutional mission of integrating faith and learning and putting character before career. As my old coach used to say, when it's academics time, your child will be a great student. When it's sports time, your child will be a great athlete, and all the time your child will be a great person. And that's something that was a mantra that was ingrained into us in college, and that's something that I think really applies to the kids here at Stony Brook and the wonderful work that they're doing. I want to talk a little bit about the ways that the academic office can support you all in your college athletic goals. And if you are in 9th grade, or even if you're in 7th or 8th grade, it is not too soon to have this conversation. We have something that we call a graduation plan, or a 4-year plan. And this is when you and typically me or a member of the academic team will sit down, and of course parents, guardians, coaches, families, everyone is invited, to make a list of the other courses that you might be taking at the Stony Brook School for the rest of your career here. This is by default. All 9th graders will go through this process this year. About 85% of current 10th graders, if they were here last year, did this process last year, and we'll get the remaining ones in this year. So it should be the case by the end of this year that all 9th and 10th graders will have this. It's really helpful for us to have a sense of what we should be offering, what's going well, where we should add more classes, but it's mostly really important to help you all think through what classes you might be able to take in your time here at Stony Brook. And particularly if you're interested in playing college athletics, particularly if you're interested in high caliber academic institutions, this would be something that is really key to make sure you're taking the right courses. If you want to be recruited into, say, the Ivy League, and it's really important and your coach tells you, yeah, you should take at least 4 APs by the time you graduate, then you don't want to be in a difficult situation going into your senior year, having not yet taken any APs, and now you have to load up your schedule a whole bunch with 4 APs. It's also really important to help us put, hopefully, some guardrails on your schedule. It's similarly, on the other side, it's important to not overload yourself with APs for your entire career. Although you should not avoid academic rigor, it is really important to take classes that are pursuing your passions, that are challenging you, but that doesn't necessarily mean take every single AP course that you can literally get into, okay? Coaches are looking for you to succeed in the classroom, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that is the only thing that matters and that you should be taking every single advanced or AP course as humanly possible. And so this is a good way for us to have that conversation early. It's also really important to note that this is not a binding agreement in any way. It's not contractual. It's really just meant to start the process. So we'll make this together. We'll share the document with you. You can take a look at our course catalog and find these things out. But by no means is this something like if you change your mind, you don't need to get permission to do this or anything like this. The normal course registration process will still play out. This 4-year plan is available probably towards the end of this month and then through the rest of the year. And I'll be sending out to students and families, et cetera, times that they can sign up to meet with a member of the academic team, and we will help you get this going. The only other thing that I wanted to mention is some of our increasingly robust offerings for academic support. It's been a really important initiative in my time in the role to grow our academic support offerings. I'm happy to say we have an academic support specialist who's on campus multiple times a week and available to meet with students upon request, and she is always willing to tutor folks. She does free SAT workshops that just happened with the SAT this past weekend. We had 5 or 6 students show up to that, and that was great. That's entirely free to students. She's got writing and math drop-in times, is able to help with executive functioning skills, study skills, organization, time management, all of those sort of things that are so important for students these days. The other thing is we have a lot of options in terms of tutoring. We have peer tutors we can assign here on campus. For students that are really struggling, we are partnered with a company called Revolution Prep, which is one of the best tutoring programs and institutes in the country, and it's virtual tutoring, and it's something that we are able to give to students in small chunks of about 6 hours, free of charge if they are interested. So I just want to make a plug for some of the academic support that we have here to support you in your college goals. If you're ever interested in coming and talking about college athletics or about college football or why the Florida Gators are the best team in college football or why Dartmouth's going to win the Ivy League this year, I'm always willing to talk with you. When I was in college, I also spent some time working actually in the coach's office, in the football office, on the recruiting end, and I'm a little old and getting gray hair now, so some of my things that I learned there might not be super up to date these days, but it was literally my job to start screening students who were trying to get recruited by Dartmouth, and I was the very first person at Dartmouth that was starting to screen them, and I would be the guy that was deciding to put this person in the yes pile, this person in the no pile, this person in the maybe pile, and send that on to the actual position coaches who would then do the actual recruiting. And as a result of that, I can talk through some of the things that were standard there at the time if you were ever interested. I'm always available to talk about it, and it's definitely a passion of mine and want to support you all in that. So thank you so much, and I'd be happy to connect with you at any time. I'd love to pass this over now to our wonderful co-director of college counseling, Mr. Eric Johnson.
All right. Happy to be here. Thank you. I want to thank the athletic office for sponsoring and organizing this event. So thank you, Mr. Moniz and Mr. Bacher, Mr. Smith. Thank you for getting this important process kind of in front of our athletes and our students. In terms of, let's see, here's the kind of last slide. You can have a look at this. These are, I think, Mr. Smith, you had been talking with an Ivy League coach that generated this slide last year. So we wanted to find out from an Ivy League coach just to figure out in terms of what advice would a coach that is at a school that's very, very hard to get into. And of course, there are other schools that are hard to get into. It's not just the Ivy Leagues, but it's a good example. What are the recommendations that they might have? And you can see these recommendations. I think some of them probably make a lot of sense, although, as Mr. Bacher referenced, we're in this phase right now where a lot of universities are not requiring an ACT or SAT test, and so you have a choice as to whether or not to submit that, and the College Counseling Office can help guide you through that. But it is important to note that not all schools are test optional, and we've even experienced this where students assumed that they were going to end up at a test optional school, but then got recruited at a school that wanted a test. That's happened to us recently, and so I think it is probably wise, unless the test optional universe becomes a little more stable and a little more predictable down the road. At least for now, I think it's probably wise to at least invest in some test prep and kind of see where you are landing for testing. It's just going to expand your options as an athlete, and it'll make sure that you don't have to close the door if a school that requires a test gets interested in you. So yeah, but you can see other things here. There are some things about rigor, there's some things about grades, about sort of pursuing appropriate level academics, and also some advice about taking the application process seriously. I think especially at the universities that are the hardest to get into, the coach needs you to be a team player with the coach, making sure that you're not creating a red flag with the admissions office. So, right, we don't want you to turn in an application that looks poorly put together, and now suddenly the coach that has been pushing for you has some explaining to do with the admissions office. You don't want to be in that position, and you don't want to put your coach in that position. So, yeah, I think this is good advice. Put time and effort into the application. Don't think of it as just a formality. And I think this last bit of advice is, I think, difficult and important. But when you talk to coaches, and I've seen this through the college counseling process, it gets important to begin distinguishing the kinds of language that coaches might be using to respond to you. And there is a difference between a very clear statement like, we're sponsoring you. That's a very different statement than, we'd love to have you at our school. And I have worked with students who have heard a lot of, we'd love to have you, and they assumed that meant probably more than it did. I would say, in general, in my experience, the kind of language like, we'd love to have you, generally means if the admissions office likes you and you get in, we'd be happy to have you. We can kind of talk at that point. But that's very different than a coach or an athletic program going to bat for you. And so those are important things to keep in mind. I would say from college counseling at the Stony Brook School, just a few observations. One is we've seen recruiting make a big difference for students, open up really great doors for them. But I would say to the point about 7% of high school athletes ending up as college athletes, I think it's also good to recognize that athletics are an important part of many high school students' experiences. It's very formative, and it provides valuable training and character formation and skills and discipline that even if you don't end up playing athletics in college, even if you don't end up being a recruited athlete, our experience has been that it still remains a positive for you in the application process. Colleges are still interested in students who have shown a lot of dedication to a high school program. Even if you aren't an athlete that ends up being recruited, that can still be a positive factor, often is a very positive factor for you in the application process. So, so my encouragement for you is, yes, like, be smart about this, especially if you are a recruited athlete. There's a lot to keep track of. The application process is pretty complicated, and then when you add recruiting on top of that, at least for a little while, it gets extra complicated because there's a lot of communication to keep track of, but it's worth the effort, and I would say, regardless of what happens for you in terms of the recruiting process, we've seen over and over and over again the way that Stony Brook students who really invest in their time here, in the classroom, on the athletic field, in the dormitories, in leadership, in clubs, all of that investment in whatever arenas you get involved with, all of that is part of what makes you you and makes you well prepared for college, makes you attractive in the college process. So I'm Eric Johnson, co-director of college counseling. I work with Chris Liu and Stacy Lingle, our college counselors, and we're happy to be a resource for you in this process. Mr. Moniz, you want to come back up?
Thank you. So, there's a few of you in the room. There's more folks watching via YouTube. Are there any questions here that you guys have that we could answer for you? If not, that's okay. You also know that you can come find us at any time, and we'd love to talk to you about these things. If you want us to call coaches for you, we'll do that. If you want us to help you put together film and an email or anything like that, we will work with you through those things and do everything we can to get you on to your destination, your goal. I'm looking at the chat, and I don't see too many questions there. So I think if there's nothing here, we do have one in the back. What's your question? So the question is, what kind of videos are coaches looking for? And what I would say to you is that really depends on the sport that you play. Certain sports are very easy for us to kind of communicate with coaches about. For example, track and cross country. We're talking about times. We're talking about distance of shot puts flying in the air and things like that. It's pretty easy for us. They also like to see technique and form and things like that, but it's pretty easy for us to get that. A sport like basketball, a lot of it's game footage, so we'll send along game footage. They might also want to see some metrics, some like jumping, things like that. But something like baseball, the sport you play, it's a little bit more complicated, and our baseball coaches are pretty skilled at kind of knowing what should be in a video like that. But it'll be maybe some game footage, but you taking some swings, if you're a pitcher throwing, showing what the velo is on the radar gun after you make a throw, things like that, form, catching a ground ball, stuff like that. See if there's any other questions. Any other questions? I can't see in the back with the lights. No? Everybody good? All right. Well, don't be strangers in the athletic office or the college counseling or academic offices. If you have questions, let us know. And thank you all for coming. We appreciate it. All right. Bye-bye.